Omega enters the Lantern Hall beside Alpha King as every Omen bends toward a hidden truth. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. The Lantern Hall was shrouded in a soft, golden glow as Emma Winters walked beside Alexander Thorne, the Alpha King. Her heart beat in a rhythm that matched the flickering flames of the lanterns that lined the stone walls, casting long shadows across the grand hall. The air was thick with anticipation, the very atmosphere seeming to hum with unspoken words, hidden truths, and an undeniable connection. Emma had never been one to believe in fate or signs, but tonight was different. The whispers of the pack, the way the wind had shifted just before they arrived, and the quiet pull she felt toward Alexander all made her wonder if something greater than chance had led her here. As they moved deeper into the hall, Emma could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on them. The guests, the council, the other alphas, everyone watched as she walked beside the Alpha King, a position she never imagined she would hold. Her life had always been marked by rejection, by being the one left behind or ignored, but now, with the Alpha King by her side, everything felt different. The hall was filled with figures draped in dark, royal fabrics, their faces half-shadowed by the soft glow of the lanterns. Despite their imposing presence, none of them dared speak a word as Alexander led Emma forward. Her steps were hesitant, but they were also sure, drawn by an invisible force that guided her along this path. She could sense it, something was about to change. Every omen, every whisper of the wind, and every glance exchanged in silence pointed toward a hidden truth that Emma couldn't yet comprehend. It was as though the very fabric of the world had shifted, aligning in ways that made this moment inevitable. Emma's breath caught as Alexander's hand brushed against hers, a small gesture but one that sent a shiver down her spine. He looked at her then, his silver eyes gleaming in the dim light, and for the first time, Emma saw not just the Alpha King, but the man who had been hiding behind the mask of power and dominance. His gaze softened ever so slightly, and in that fleeting moment, Emma realized something. This was no longer just a journey of chance or duty. It was something deeper, something far more personal. They continued forward, the tension in the air building, the truth of their bond lingering in the space between them. Tonight, in the Lantern Hall, every omen had bent toward this hidden truth, and Emma, though uncertain, knew one thing for sure: her life, and her future, would never be the same again. As Emma and Alexander continued to walk deeper into the Lantern Hall, the atmosphere grew even more intense. The flickering lights above cast long shadows that danced across the cold stone floor, creating an eerie and magical ambience. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, but it was not out of fear, it was anticipation, as if her very soul was drawn into this moment, this place, where fate and destiny intertwined. The hall seemed to stretch endlessly, the lanterns illuminating walls lined with ancient tapestries depicting the great battles and victories of Alpha Kings long past. Yet, it wasn't the history that held Emma's attention, it was Alexander, the Alpha King walking beside her. She had known him for years, of course, but never like this. She had seen the Alpha King in public, surrounded by others, his presence commanding and cold, but tonight was different. Tonight, it was as if the veil had been lifted, revealing a man who was not just a ruler, but someone who was connected to her in ways she couldn't yet explain. The silence between them was palpable, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence that spoke volumes, as though their hearts beat in sync with each other, a connection neither could deny. Emma stole a glance at Alexander, and their eyes met for just a fleeting second. His gaze softened, and in that brief moment, Emma saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before: vulnerability. It was as though the mask he wore as Alpha King had slipped, and for the first time, she was seeing the man behind the crown. She wasn't sure if it was the magic of the moment or something more profound, but it felt as though something was shifting between them, something beyond their control. They reached the center of the hall, where a large, ornate table stood surrounded by high-ranking members of the pack, their faces a mix of curiosity and expectation. Emma stood beside Alexander, feeling the weight of the eyes on her. She had always been in the background, the one who watched from the sidelines, but tonight was different. Tonight, she was beside the Alpha King. The silence was broken as the elder of the pack spoke, his voice deep and commanding. Alpha King, Omega, he began, his eyes briefly scanning Emma, the time has come for the truth to be revealed. The words sent a shiver down Emma's spine. She wasn't sure what he meant, but the gravity of his tone told her that whatever was coming, it was something that would change everything. As the elder continued speaking, Emma felt her pulse quicken, her hands suddenly cold despite the warmth of the hall. She turned her gaze back to Alexander, who stood tall and regal beside her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, she wondered if he knew what was about to unfold, if he had been waiting for this moment as long as she had. Before she could ask, the elder's words echoed through the hall again, louder this time. The truth you seek, Omega, is bound by the very soul of the Alpha King. Emma's breath hitched. She wasn't sure what it meant, but she could feel the weight of the words settling deep within her chest, a sensation of inevitability that she couldn't shake. Alexander stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate, his gaze never leaving hers. The hall fell silent, and Emma could hear the faintest whisper of her own breath as she watched him. He raised his hand, and the air seemed to shift around them, charged with an energy that felt almost palpable. The truth, the hidden truth, was about to be revealed, and Emma could feel every fiber of her being pulled toward it, knowing that whatever came next would change her life forever. The air was thick with anticipation as the elder's words hung in the air like a heavy mist, their meaning clear but shrouded in mystery. Emma's heart beat faster with each passing second, her senses heightened by the tension that now filled the hall. The truth that was about to be revealed was something beyond her understanding, but she could feel it deep within her, as if every part of her being was instinctively pulling her toward it. Alexander stood beside her, his expression unreadable, yet there was something in his eyes, a flicker of emotion that Emma had never seen before. For a brief moment, she saw him not as the powerful Alpha King, but as a man who was just as uncertain and vulnerable as she felt in this moment. The elder stepped forward, his voice low but carrying authority. Tonight, Omega, you will come to know the truth of your fate, the truth that binds you to the Alpha King. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The words seemed to echo through her mind, each one sinking deeper into her soul. The gravity of the moment was undeniable, and for the first time in her life, Emma felt as though she were standing on the precipice of something far greater than herself. Alexander reached out and gently placed his hand on her shoulder, a simple gesture, but one that sent a wave of warmth through her. His touch grounded her, reminding her that she was not alone in this moment. Emma, he said softly, his voice carrying a tenderness that surprised her. What you are about to learn will change everything. But know this, you are not just an Omega. You are my mate, my equal, and everything I do for you, for us. His words, so unexpected and yet so powerful, sent a shiver down Emma's spine. She turned to face him, her heart racing as she searched his eyes for any sign of doubt. But all she saw was sincerity, a depth of emotion that mirrored her own confusion and longing. You knew, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. I knew, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. But I had to be sure, had to see if you were ready. And now, I know you are. Emma could feel her world shifting beneath her feet. Everything she had believed, everything she had been taught about her place in the world, was now being turned upside down. She had always been told she was nothing more than a weak Omega, someone who existed only to serve. But here, in this moment, standing beside the Alpha King, she felt something different, something powerful and undeniable. The elder raised his hand, signaling that the time had come. It is time for the truth to be revealed, he declared, his voice echoing through the hall. The Alpha King's curse, the truth that has bound him for years, and the role that you, Omega, are destined to play in it. Emma's heart skipped a beat as she turned to Alexander, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. What truth was he speaking of? What curse had Alexander been hiding all this time? As if an answer, Alexander stepped forward, his hand still on Emma's shoulder. The curse that binds me, he began, his voice quiet but firm, is one that has haunted my family for generations. It is a curse of the soul, one that prevents me from ever truly finding peace, from ever truly being free. Emma's mind raced as she tried to process his words. A curse? The Alpha King, cursed? It seemed impossible, yet the weight of his words was undeniable. But you, he continued, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. You are the key to breaking it. You are the one who can free me from the curse that has bound me for so long. Emma's breath caught in her throat as the realization hit her like a tidal wave. She was not just an Omega, not just a servant or a tool for the Alpha King. She was his mate, the one destined to free him, to break the curse and change the course of their lives forever. The truth was finally beginning to make sense, and Emma knew that nothing would ever be the same again. As Alexander's words hung in the air, Emma felt as though the ground beneath her was shifting, changing. The weight of the truth, the burden of his curse, pressed down on her, and for a moment, she wasn't sure if she could bear it. She had always known there was something different about him, something that set him apart from the others, but this? This was beyond anything she could have imagined. He was cursed. The Alpha King, the man who ruled with such power and authority, was bound by something beyond his control. And now, she was the key to breaking it. The realization sent a shiver down her spine, a mixture of fear and awe filling her chest. How could she possibly help him? What could she do to lift a curse that had haunted his family for generations? Emma's mind raced, but before she could speak, Alexander's voice broke through her thoughts. I never wanted to burden you with this, he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of years of struggle. But now, it seems there is no choice. The curse binds us both, and only you can free me from it. His words were heavy with emotion, but there was something else in his eyes, something that made Emma's heart ache. It wasn't just duty or obligation that had brought her here. It was something deeper, something that ran through her veins just as surely as it did through his. She was his mate. And whether she was ready or not, the truth was undeniable. She stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice steady as she met his gaze. I don't understand, she admitted. But I will try. For you. Alexander's eyes softened, the hard edge of his king's mask slipping away for just a moment. He reached out, his hand warm and strong against her skin, grounding her in the whirlwind of confusion and emotion that threatened to overtake her. Thank you, he whispered. That is all I ask. The elder stepped forward, his ancient eyes gleaming with quiet approval. The path ahead will not be easy, he said, his voice carrying the weight of truth. There will be trials, tests of both strength and heart. But know this, what is to come is meant to be. The hall fell silent once more, the air thick with the gravity of his words. Emma's heart beat loudly in her chest as she turned to face Alexander, her mind racing with questions. What trials? What tests? The elder's cryptic words offered no answers, only more uncertainty. But in that moment, Emma knew one thing for certain. She would not turn away. She could not. The bond between her and Alexander was something undeniable, something that transcended the curse, the trials, and everything else that lay ahead. She was his mate. And together, they would face whatever came their way. As the elder's words faded into the background, Emma stood at the edge of the unknown, her hand still resting in Alexander's. The lantern hall, once filled with the weight of history and expectation, now felt like the beginning of something new. The truth had been revealed. And with it, a new chapter in both their lives was about to unfold. The weight of the moment hung in the air as Emma stood beside Alexander, her heart still racing from the revelations of the past few minutes. The elder's words echoed in her mind: trials, tests of both strength and heart. What did it all mean? What kind of trials would they face? And how could she, an Omega, be the key to breaking such a deep and ancient curse? These questions flooded her mind, but as her gaze met Alexander's, the uncertainty began to fade. There was something in his eyes, a quiet resolve, a strength that reassured her. He was the Alpha King, bound by a curse, yet she was here, standing beside him, ready to face whatever came next. We will get through this, he said, his voice calm, but the intensity in his eyes told her he was just as uncertain as she was. Together. Emma nodded, the simple promise offering a sense of comfort. The gravity of their bond, the weight of their shared fate, seemed to anchor her, grounding her as they faced the unknown ahead. As they left the lantern hall, the night air was cool against her skin. The streets of the kingdom were quiet, the only sounds being the soft rustling of leaves in the wind and the distant call of night creatures. Emma felt a strange sense of peace wash over her, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead. She was no longer just an Omega, no longer the overlooked, the dismissed. She was standing beside the Alpha King, her mate, and together, they would face the trials ahead. They walked through the quiet streets, the palace looming ahead of them like a silent sentinel, its stone walls bathed in the soft light of the moon. Alexander's presence beside her felt like a shield, a reminder that, no matter what challenges came their way, they were not alone. As they approached the palace, the towering gates slowly creaked open, the guards standing at attention. As they passed, the grand halls of the palace were quiet, save for the occasional sound of footsteps echoing off the stone floors. Emma couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the place. It was a palace, yes, but it was also a prison, a place where Alexander had been trapped by his curse for so long. She could see the weight of it in his posture, the way his shoulders seemed to carry the burden of his title. "You don't have to do this," Emma said softly, her voice breaking the silence between them. Alexander looked at her, his expression softening. "I've been carrying this burden for years," he replied, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I am not carrying it alone anymore. You're with me now, Emma. We face this together." His words, so simple, yet so profound, filled her with warmth. She had never imagined that her life would take such a turn, that she would stand beside a man like Alexander, the Alpha King. But here she was, and she would stand by his side, through whatever trials awaited them. As they entered the grand chamber, the weight of the future seemed to press down on them both. The flickering candlelight cast shadows on the walls, and Emma could feel the power that resonated within the palace, the ancient energy that had long been tied to the Thorn family and the Alpha King's curse. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would face it together. Whatever it took, whatever the trials may be, Emma knew that she had found her place at last. Beside Alexander, they would uncover the hidden truths, break the curse, and carve out a future that was truly theirs. As the days passed, the tension between Emma and Alexander only grew stronger. The weight of the curse that bound them, the trials they had yet to face, loomed over them both like a shadow. Yet, in the quiet moments, when it was just the two of them, Emma could feel the bond growing stronger. It was not just the pull of fate or destiny, it was something deeper, something that resonated with every part of her being. She was his mate, and together, they would face whatever came next. They spent their time preparing for the trials ahead, learning everything they could about the curse that had haunted Alexander's family for generations. But no matter how many ancient texts they pored over, no matter how many cryptic prophecies they uncovered, the truth remained elusive. The curse was tied to Alexander's very soul, and only by breaking it could he truly be free. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the palace in a golden hue, Emma and Alexander stood together on the balcony, looking out over the kingdom. The city below was alive with activity, the streets bustling with life, but above, in the sky, the stars were beginning to twinkle, silent witnesses to the destiny unfolding before them. "Do you ever wonder," Emma asked softly, her voice almost lost in the breeze, "if we were meant to find each other?" Alexander turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. "Every day," he replied quietly. "I've spent my life searching for answers, for a way to break this curse, but it wasn't until you came into my life that I truly began to believe it was possible." Emma's heart swelled with emotion. She had never imagined that her life would take this turn, that she would be standing beside the Alpha King, working together to break an ancient curse. But here they were, and no matter how uncertain the future seemed, she knew one thing for sure: she would not walk this path alone. "I don't know what will happen," Emma continued, her voice barely a whisper, "but I know I'm not afraid." "Not anymore." Alexander reached out, taking her hand in his. "You are braver than you know, Emma," he said softly. "Together, we will face whatever comes. And I will not let anything happen to you." The promise in his voice, firm and unwavering, gave Emma the strength she needed to keep going. She had always felt like she was destined for something greater, but now, standing by Alexander's side, she realized that destiny was not something that happened to her, it was something she was creating with him, step by step. As the night fell, the kingdom below them grew quieter, and the weight of the trials ahead began to settle in. But Emma felt ready. She had never been more certain of anything in her life. They were meant to do this together, and no matter how difficult the road ahead, she knew that with Alexander by her side, they could break the curse and build a future together. The lanterns below flickered in the night, their soft glow a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always light to guide them forward. Days passed, and the weight of the upcoming trials grew heavier. Alexander and Emma had spent their time in the palace library, surrounded by ancient scrolls and books filled with forgotten lore. The more they read, the more questions arose. The curse that bound Alexander was like a puzzle with pieces scattered across time, each part connected to a moment long past. Emma's mind often wandered as she tried to piece together the cryptic riddles, but Alexander's presence kept her grounded. He was always there, a steady force beside her, offering both strength and comfort in equal measure. But despite the hours they spent together, the truth remained elusive. "What if we're missing something?" Emma asked one evening, her voice tinged with frustration. She leaned over a scroll, her brow furrowed in concentration as she studied the ancient symbols. Alexander, sitting beside her, looked over at the scroll, his expression thoughtful. "We're not missing anything," he said softly, "it's just not time yet." Emma glanced up at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of doubt. "But what if it's not enough? What if we're not strong enough to break the curse?" Alexander's gaze softened, and he reached for her hand. "You are more than strong enough, Emma," he said with conviction. "We both are. The curse is old, and it has kept me bound for many years, but it's not invincible. We will break it. I promise you." His words were comforting, but Emma still felt the weight of uncertainty pressing against her chest. The more they uncovered, the more she realized how little they truly knew. There were pieces of the puzzle that still didn't fit, and with each passing day, the trials loomed closer. The night before the first trial, Emma stood alone on the balcony, looking out over the kingdom. The stars above were clear, their light faint but steady. It was a peaceful sight, yet Emma's heart was restless. She could feel the pull of destiny, the weight of the responsibility she now carried. It wasn't just about breaking the curse anymore, it was about more than that. She had become a part of this world, of Alexander's world, and that world was about to change. A soft step behind her made her turn, and there stood Alexander, his eyes warm with understanding. "I know what you're thinking," he said, his voice low. "It's not just the curse, is it?" Emma shook her head. "No," she admitted. "It's everything. I never imagined my life would become this. But now, it's like I'm living in two worlds at once. And I don't know what the future holds for either of us." Alexander stepped closer, his presence a quiet reassurance. "You don't have to know everything," he said softly. "You only need to know that I'm with you. Always." His words filled her with a sense of peace she hadn't realized she needed. In that moment, standing side by side with him under the starry sky, Emma realized that she wasn't alone. Whatever the trials would bring, they would face them together. The bond between them was stronger than any curse, and she would not let it break. The trials were still ahead, but now Emma felt ready. With Alexander by her side, she would face whatever came next, knowing that together, they were unstoppable. The morning of the first trial arrived, and the tension in the air was palpable. Emma stood at the edge of the balcony once again, her eyes scanning the horizon as the sun began to rise. The golden light touched the edges of the kingdom, casting long shadows across the stone walls of the palace. It was a peaceful sight, but Emma's heart beat with uncertainty. The trials had begun, and the weight of the unknown pressed down on her. Beside her, Alexander stood silently, his presence steady and strong. She could feel the quiet power radiating from him, yet there was something in his eyes that betrayed the calm exterior uncertainty, just like hers. "It's time," he said softly, his voice carrying a quiet intensity. Emma nodded, taking a deep breath. "I'm ready," she replied, though she wasn't sure if she truly was. The truth was, she had no idea what the trials would bring. They had prepared as much as they could, but there were still so many unknowns. The only thing she knew for sure was that she wasn't going through this alone. Alexander's hand brushed against hers, a silent promise that they would face everything together. The trial grounds were located outside the palace, in a vast arena surrounded by tall, ancient trees. As they made their way toward the site, Emma could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The air was thick with anticipation, and the sounds of the forest seemed muted as they approached. The ground beneath her feet felt solid, but the uncertainty in her chest was anything but. The arena was already filled with members of the pack, their faces serious and expectant. The council stood at the front, their eyes following Alexander and Emma as they entered. Emma could feel their gaze, the weight of their expectations, but she refused to let it shake her. This was not just about proving herself to them, it was about proving to herself that she was capable. As they reached the center of the arena, the elder from the council stepped forward, his expression grave. Alpha King, Omega, he began, his voice carrying through the quiet crowd. The first trial is upon you. Are you prepared? Emma's breath caught in her throat. She looked to Alexander, his face a mask of determination. He nodded slightly, and Emma found the strength to speak. We are ready, she said, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. The elder nodded and motioned to a large stone pedestal in the center of the arena. The first trial will test your resolve, he explained. You must both face the trial of trust, a trial where only true strength of heart can lead to success. Emma's mind raced as she tried to understand what the trial would entail. The elder continued, you will each be bound to separate stones. For the next hour, you must remain apart, unable to communicate in any way. The trial will test your trust in one another, your faith in the bond that has brought you here. Alexander squeezed Emma's hand briefly before stepping back, his eyes never leaving hers. Emma's heart fluttered with both fear and hope. She trusted him, but the unknown stretched out before her, daunting and uncertain. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves threatening to overtake her. The elders signaled for the trial to begin, and Emma was led to one of the stone pedestals. As she stepped onto the cold surface, she felt a strange surge of energy, as if something deep within her was awakening. The stone beneath her feet seemed to pulse with power, as if it were attuned to the bond she shared with Alexander. She glanced over at him, her heart aching with the distance between them. But then, she closed her eyes and focused on the bond between them. The bond that had brought them here, that had drawn them together against all odds. She could feel it, even from this distance. The connection that tied them, a thread of power and trust that was stronger than anything she had ever known. Time seemed to stretch as the minutes passed. The silence between them was deafening, but Emma didn't falter. She held on to that bond, that connection, letting it guide her through the trial. She trusted him. She trusted that, no matter what, they would succeed. As the hour drew to a close, the elder returned to the center of the arena, his gaze shifting between Emma and Alexander. The trial of trust is complete, he said, his voice heavy with meaning. Emma's heart raced as she waited for the verdict. You have both shown true strength, the elder continued, his expression approving. You have passed the first trial. Emma exhaled a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The first trial was behind them, but there were still more to come. And as they stood there, facing the uncertain future ahead, Emma knew one thing: whatever trials lay in wait, she would face them with Alexander by her side. The first trial was complete, but Emma could feel that it was only the beginning. The weight of the remaining challenges loomed heavily, and as the day passed, she found herself unable to shake the feeling that the trials ahead would test more than just her physical or emotional strength, they would test the very core of her being, and the bond she shared with Alexander. As the sun began to set, casting the sky in shades of deep orange and purple, Alexander and Emma found themselves alone in the quiet of the palace gardens. The scent of blooming jasmine and roses filled the air, but Emma couldn't help but feel a heaviness in her chest. She had passed the first trial, but what if she wasn't strong enough for what was to come? Alexander stood beside her, his hand resting gently on the stone railing, his gaze focused on the horizon. He, too, seemed lost in thought. For a moment, Emma considered speaking, but the weight of the unspoken hung between them, an invisible thread that connected them both in a way words could not. Finally, Alexander broke the silence, his voice low and steady. You did well today, he said, his gaze shifting toward her. But this is just the beginning. The hardest part is still ahead. Emma turned to face him, her heart racing. I know, she said quietly. But what if I'm not enough? What if we can't break the curse? Alexander's eyes softened as he stepped closer, his presence comforting yet filled with an unspoken sadness. You are more than enough, Emma, he said, his voice filled with conviction. You are my mate, and together, we will face whatever challenges come our way. We've already come this far. We won't stop now. Emma looked up at him, her heart swelling with emotion. The uncertainty, the fear that had been building inside her, began to melt away under the warmth of his words. She trusted him, completely. She could feel the bond between them, stronger than ever before, and it gave her the strength to keep going. I believe in us, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I believe in you, Alexander. His hand reached for hers, his fingers intertwining with hers in a simple but powerful gesture. And I believe in you, Emma. Together, we'll make it through. No matter what. The sincerity in his words was undeniable, and for the first time in days, Emma felt a sense of peace. The trials, the curse, they were all still out there, waiting. But in that moment, standing together in the quiet garden, Emma knew that she was not alone. They would face whatever came next, hand in hand, and they would succeed. The moon rose high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the gardens, and Emma and Alexander stood together, the weight of the future ahead of them, but for the first time in a long while, Emma felt ready. The bond between them was unbreakable, and with that, she knew they could conquer anything. The road ahead would not be easy, but with Alexander by her side, she could face it with courage, strength, and love.